Well, hello. Today we're looking at Objective 3 of our workshop entitled Caring for the Addicted Through Discipleship. Objective 3 is defining Jesus' model of care and discipleship. And for those of you who have been following our workshop, we've had several videos thus far. And the first objective being defining addiction as a spiritual issue. Objective number 2, defining the need for care and discipleship. And today, again, we're looking at defining Jesus' model of care and discipleship. In other words, how did Jesus minister in different ways to different people based on their need? The thought being, as we reach out to individuals who are struggling, whether they be family members, church acquaintances, or just friends of our family, maybe, we want to realize that not everybody responds to the same counsel, the same advice, the same response, the same approach. And so today we're just looking briefly at how Jesus ministered to different individuals. Well, we know that the Lord spent quite a bit of time preaching to the multitudes, and there's a template that we would use in Stauros that actually comes back from the Wesleys several hundred years back when they were developing their method of ministry. They used what was called a 3-strand church model. There's a few individuals today would use that same model with discipleship materials and curriculum and such. And when I go to churches or speak to groupings, I would say that we often help with that 3rd strand. The first strand being preaching to the multitudes, and Jesus demonstrated that and did that quite regularly throughout his ministry. But then he also had the 12 disciples that he really spent significant time with and taught them to model his mode of ministry, his method of ministry. But then he had Peter, James, and John, sort of his core group. The Wesleys call it a band, relating to a band of brothers, if you will. That really tight-knit core group. We use that in Stauros as one-to-one, and I do often have groups of 1 or 2 or 3 guys that we get together, do a little bit more intimate accountability and things like that. But looking at the objective today, particularly, is that 3rd strand, if you will, the one-to-one ministry and how Jesus encountered different individuals. We're not going to read the scriptures for the sake of time today. If you are interested in attending one of our workshops, which we hope to resume after the pandemic has subsided enough that it's safe enough to do so, we will go more in depth and read through the scriptures and look more at the examples. But today, this is an overview. This is something that will give you an idea. I would encourage you to go and read through the related scriptures and think about what it is that we're looking at today. So I have a list of them in our booklet that we would pass out for the workshop. But again, for today, we're going to look at 4 examples of how Jesus ministered to 4 different individuals. The first one being Nicodemus in John chapter 3. You would find it in verses 1 through 21 of the Gospel of John chapter 3. Now, Nicodemus was a man who had knowledge of the scriptures. He had knowledge of that the scriptures as they were back then, the Old Testament, and would have professed that knowledge, but also would have had that knowledge. And Jesus knew that. And when Jesus encountered Nicodemus, again, you can read through in chapter 3, beginning in verse 1 through 21. But the part that I think about was he said, you must be born again to inherit the kingdom of God. I'm kind of paraphrasing a little bit. But really, he was very frank and plain and to the point with him. So there are times when we encounter people who would have church experience, would have biblical knowledge, would have some understanding of the way that the Lord has said he would work, that he has promised he would work, and the way he does work. And so we don't necessarily need to go back to the basics with them, but we do need to say to them, much as Jesus did to Nicodemus, really, you must be born again to inherit the kingdom of God. All these things that you're familiar with and aware of and know about are good. I don't need to go over those with you again as such, but you must be born again. The second comes from the Gospel of John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. And here there was a woman who was caught in adultery, And the leaders at the time, they brought her together. They got together and brought her before Jesus and asked what they should do. And Jesus said, again, I'm paraphrasing, let him who is without sin be the first to cast a stone at her, because stoning was the method of punishment for that particular wrongdoing at the time. And the way I would look at that and the way I would describe that to individuals is there are times when we are a protector or a buffer for the one who is struggling. There's a man that I met with for a number of years, and he's sadly passed away, but I used to meet with him, and I would go over to his home, and he would be sometimes drinking, just out of sorts, sometimes not. But oftentimes when I would go visit, his wife would come sort of barreling into the room and telling him and telling me what she's been telling him, that he needs Jesus and he needs this, he needs to do that and do the other thing. And while I didn't disagree probably with anything she said, that way of doing it in that fashion was not helpful to our conversation. Now, I understood the frustration she was suffering through, and I understood that she was just very frustrated and wanted him to hear things and wanted somebody else to concur with her that she was accurate in what she was saying to him. But that was not the time nor the place. And I would ask her privately or sometimes with him there if there weren't things maybe she was dealing with, or I would really ask her kindly to leave and give us time alone that he and I could talk. So I was his protector in that sense. Again, I wasn't, in this case now, not necessarily referring to the scriptures directly here, but in that case I wasn't telling her she was wrong, but really just letting her know that that was not helpful at that time. So there are times when we need to be that buffer, that protector for the one who was struggling. The third one is Matthew chapter 8. There was a centurion who came to Jesus and said to him that his servant was very sick, and if Jesus saw fit, would he heal him? And Jesus said to him that your faith is so strong that your servant is now healed. Now, we don't read more about that. Certainly that's true. If Jesus said so, it was true. And so the faith of the centurion, the faith of the, not family member directly, but certainly the faith of a man in the household, of a person in the household of the servant who was sick, brought him, that servant, to healing. So there are times when our faithfulness and our prayers can do work. Some of the men and women who have helped me through in Stauros and in general in my Christian walk have reminded me that oftentimes it's our prayers for someone that makes all the difference. We know that certainly prayer does make a difference, and we do that, but often that's all that's needed. And so I'm reminded of that when I can't see someone, when they're not willing to be seen, they don't want to meet with anyone, they don't want to meet with me. I'm reminded that my prayers can be enough to do the work that the Lord has promised to do in the lives of others. So that's a very encouraging thought to me, that we don't always have to encounter people and see them and be with them in order for them to be changed by the Lord. And then the fourth one to look at today is in Mark chapter 7, verses 31 and following. There was a boy that was brought to Jesus, and he was deaf and had a speech impediment. And there's a great verse. My brother Tom Eakins would share this quite often when he would come to America to preach in days gone by. And there's a little section in that encounter where it says that he took him aside from the crowd. And Tom would have used that story to really highlight the ministry of Stauros. That's often what we do, is take men and women aside from the crowd, one to one. Pull them away from the place where they feel uncomfortable. Whether they are made to feel that way or not is not the issue. If they're feeling that way, then it's real for them. They might be in a place of getting criticized and getting belittled. Again, those things might be not justified, but they might be true things. But we want to pull them aside from the crowd so that embarrassment, that shame that they might be feeling, at least isn't magnified by the presence of others. So it's a great section there to read through in chapter 7 of Mark, verses 31 and following. Well, there's a quote that we have in our booklet that we use quite often, and we discuss this in our workshop and talk about it some. But Billy Graham, most would recognize him as a very influential man with all the mass crusades and things that he organized and spent his life really preaching at and speaking at. He says this, there's a quote that I came across that says, "Mass crusades in which I believe and to which I have committed my life will never finish the Great Commission, but a one-to-one ministry will." So again, if we think of that three-strand model, we need the preaching to the multitudes. We need the classes, and most churches I talk with have those moving fairly well. You know, they have their Sunday morning services, maybe a Sunday night service, maybe 2 or 3 on a Sunday, and even sometimes on Sunday evenings, and then they have their Wednesday night smaller group teachings often, or midweek teachings, whatever night that might be. But so many of them do say that that third strand, if in fact they're agreeing that that's a needed model, they would say that they struggle a bit in that. So our ministry focuses on that. We sort of do the reverse. We meet one-to-one and then meet in small groups with folks and then do larger gatherings as more people come about. But really we try to get them connected into church life for the second and third strand for that to be accomplished in general church life. So that's our third objective, defining Jesus' model of care and discipleship, looking a bit at how Jesus ministered in different ways. We have a few more listed in our booklet we go over when we are sitting with a group doing this. The next video, we'll try to have that out soon, is the fourth objective, the final objective, and that's defining the Christian's role as carer, discipler. And really what we're doing there is looking at what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, what to watch for, what to look past. Again, it's not the same with everyone, but there are some common misconceptions that that a Christian should just be a doormat for anyone to run over, because that's what Jesus did. But as we saw in Objective 3 and look at, he wasn't a doormat for people. He used wisdom from his Father and addressed things from the wisdom that he gained. And so in this fourth objective, which we'll have out in a week or so, we'll be looking at that. And that's probably our longest objective, looking at all the ways that we can minister to individuals and what we need to watch for and be careful with. So we hope that this was helpful for you today, and we look forward to bringing before you our fourth objective. And then we also look forward to being able to schedule, possibly by Zoom if this pandemic continues on for a length of time, but certainly in person, to come to some of the churches we've already scheduled, but also maybe to your church or your group. So we hope this was helpful today. We look forward to seeing you for objective number 4.